Welcome to Talaterra, a podcast about freelance educators working in natural resource fields and environmental education. Who are these educators? What do they do? Join me, and let's find out together. This is your host, Tania Marien. Today, my guest is Miguel Cruz. Miguel has worked in the field of environmental education for more than 5 years. When it comes to writing curriculum and designing learning environments, Miguel is always thinking about how to meet people where they are. He puts considerable thought into co-designing experiences with participants, and even more thought into how he can respect the lived experiences of the individuals in his programs. Recently, Miguel moved to Mexico, and he's in the process of establishing himself as an independent environmental education professional and cultural educator. He is learning his family's indigenous language of Otomi, and in this episode, Miguel and I talk about his plans to establish environmental education programs in his new home of Mexico. Let's join the conversation. Welcome, Miguel, and thank you so much for stopping by to talk about your work today. Could you introduce yourself to listeners, please?
Of course. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Miguel Cruz, and I am an environmental educator. And beyond an environmental educator, I would say a cultural educator, because I am passionate about bringing in the connections of culture to environmental education, especially when it comes to language education.
Oh, that's wonderful. What interests you about language education specifically?
I have always been really interested in languages. As when I was growing up, I wanted to learn different languages, and in high school, I took French, and then in college, I took some Mandarin Chinese classes, and then I realized that there was something that I wasn't paying attention to, and that is my own indigenous language. My dad grew up speaking an indigenous language of Mexico called Otomi or Ñañu, and while I learned a few words here and there growing up, I didn't really focus attention in learning that language until high school years and later.
And how are you incorporating that language? I'm making assumptions here. I assume that you're focusing on that language in particular, incorporating that into your curriculum design and your programming?
Not yet. That is definitely the plan, but so far what I have focused on is connecting with the students wherever I may be and centering their experiences into the language, into the environmental education. So that may include their own languages that they grew up knowing, or sometimes even their indigenous languages.
You are in the early stages of establishing yourself as an independent environmental education professional. And I was wondering, why are you choosing the freelance path? What do you hope to achieve as a freelancer, as an independent professional, that you feel you can't do in a traditional work environment that is traditional where the field is concerned?
So the biggest reason I went into freelance work is to have the independence of being able to spend a large amount of time here in Mexico. As I mentioned previously, my dad is from an indigenous community in Mexico, and it has basically been a lifelong dream for me to live in Mexico, to continue learning my indigenous language, to get to know what life is like, to get to learn the traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, as people are calling it right now. And just a couple vacations out of the year to come to Mexico. Like a couple of weeks vacations wasn't really doing it for me. So I wanted to experience really living and working in my dad's traditional homeland.
Oh, that's wonderful. What do you want to establish in Mexico? What do you hope to create in Mexico that does not exist now when it comes to environmental education and also when it comes to a new generation learning or working within the indigenous language, your indigenous language?
Yeah, I could think of a few things that I would like to establish. On the one hand, I would like to see more connections made in the environmental education industry between environmental education and the knowledge of indigenous history, indigenous languages, and social justice, especially when it comes to indigenous issues. Then on the other hand, I also see a need for more opportunities for education, especially environmental education for youth of color, especially indigenous youth. So those are the two main things that I would like to work on while I am in Mexico.
What to you is missing within these two domains?
I think in environmental education, I think that many times it is missing the tech, as they call it, the traditional ecological knowledge that indigenous folks have gathered through the thousands of years that they have lived in these areas, and where basically their languages were developed alongside the knowledge of the ecology. So whereas scientists have a great system of informing themselves about the world around them, it still has only been a few centuries, depending on where in the world they are, where they are learning about these ecological places, whereas the indigenous folks of the region have so much traditional knowledge that is being lost because of assimilation, globalization. So there's a lot that each field can offer each other to work together to solve the problems of environmental degradation, of climate change, and things like that. When it comes to the indigenous youth and the education, that, how do I phrase this? So there is also a lack of really relevant education that people of color are receiving. And as we see in the environmental education field, it already is a revolutionary movement where we know that youth learn better when they learn outside, when they learn hands-on. So just the environmental education alone would be a great resource for indigenous communities. And if indigenous youth see their own culture reflected in this education, then it'll be that much more relevant and exciting.
All right. So what I'm hearing is that you are using environmental education as a pathway to enrich people's understanding of your culture, of also the environment overall. And that is wonderful. And I can't wait to ask more details about what you're going to do. But first, I would like to ask you, what has prepared you for this moment to bring environmental education down to Mexico, to establish yourself there, to focus on your indigenous language, and to teach using this language? You mentioned earlier that you've gained confidence by what you've experienced, your learning experiences in other aspects of the field. Now, you mentioned also that you were part of the Beatles program. Yes. What? Okay. First, let me explain. The Beatles is an acronym for listeners, and it's spelled like the insect beetles, but the acronym stands for Better Environmental Education, Teaching, Learning, and Expertise Sharing. That's what the Beatles acronym stands for. And so how did that experience prepare you for what you are about to?
I previously mentioned how environmental education is already like a revolutionary field where students really learn better when they are outside. But as I worked through different environmental education organizations, I saw that there was also a need for the teaching methods to be revolutionary. It's great to be outside, but if we are just lecturing in the outdoors, it's not as impactful as having the youth really experience the outdoors and test things out and learn for themselves. I work for an organization called Sierra Nevada Journeys, where they were really focused on teaching the Beatles framework, and that is where that's where I learned to match my teaching style to the surroundings where I was teaching. And I learned to, how to gauge for previous knowledge, how to hook the participants into the lesson by using the surroundings, get them interested in something that they see, like a rotting log, a leaf, an interesting insect that they've never seen before, put their hands in the river and look underneath rocks and have them ask questions for themselves. And then from there, looking at the possibilities for answers, and then hitting them with the knowledge. And then after that, it's still not done. Then there's still the reflection of what has been learned. So that was just really inspiring to me, that teaching can be two-sided or even student-centered, that I recognize that I don't know everything. I don't know all the answers. So even if there is something that we encounter in nature where I don't know how to identify a tree or something, just the experience itself of looking at the tree and wondering and the students making their own hypotheses is a valuable experience in of itself. And then that teaching style is also revolutionary, and there's always more ways that people are thinking about of how to make teaching more and more student-centered, more and more centered in the community that the program is serving. After Sierra Nevada Journeys, I started working at the Christie Field Center, where I was able to bring the Beatles framework with me, but also they had other frameworks and other ways of teaching that were also really meaningful to the students, in which we centered the history and the experiences of the students living in San Francisco. And that's also another way to bring in not just the learning of the environment, but also the culture and the history of the place where one is teaching.
Yes. You've mentioned that you like to co-design experiences with learners. What does the co-design process look like when in informal learning environments, the location is always changing? Also, the participants and the learners who you're working with is always changing as well. And it could be an intergenerational group, right? There won't always be, say, K-12 type groups. It could be multi-generational groups. And so what might the co-design process look like in one of your programs?
It really could depend on how long the program is. For example, I have taught in year-long programs where it can begin with like community building and team building and really getting to know the goals of each of the participants and what they want to get out of the program, or like what they want to do after high school, for example, and trying to design those the experiences around what it is that they want to know about. And then sometimes that is constricted by the goals already set, maybe by the teachers that I could be partnering with. But let's say it's also, if it's, for example, a one-day program, it could be as simple as gauging their knowledge, playing like a game where I found out how much they know about the issue we're going to learn today, and then use that to know where to go from there in the lesson.
And how might you encourage conversation around the lived experiences of participants in your program? In your experience, how long does it take for people to get comfortable with each other and with you as well? Because there needs to be some level of trust and comfort between all involved, especially the learners. So how do you encourage that type of conversation?
Yeah, I think part of it could be the type of program. If one organizes a camping trip, for example, a trip to Yosemite, and then there's more time to incorporate those intentional community building activities. Really, sometimes it just takes, no, I shouldn't say it just takes, but sometimes it includes those silly games where people just, like, for example, like the pterodactyl game, where you try to make each other laugh by making silly faces. And just letting your guard down to not be super serious all the time, and letting our own personalities show. And then it also comes with having empathy and having lived some of the same experiences as the community, which is the importance of having a diverse staff that provides a program. And if it's for example, for freelancers who might not have like a huge team, for example, it could be just really trying to get to know the community, asking questions of the participants, starting at just really getting to know them, like what their interests are, what they like to do in their free time, things like that. So
those are perfect examples. What are you working on now? What stage is your project in as you establish yourself in Mexico? Are you busy with outreach activities? Are you writing curriculum? And who have you been able to partner, meet new community partners, establish new relationships? How are things going for you?
So at the moment, I am basically just trying to establish myself, like, personally in the country. I am in a house that is not very livable at the moment. So I'm just trying to make sure all the maintenance on it is figured out. And I'm making connections in the community, and really just talking to people in the community, family members, family friends, because it's a very small town, and letting them know of what my overall plans are, which is learning the indigenous language, asking who still speaks the language, who teaches the language, and then from there figuring out a way that I can work so that I can stay there, because I didn't come to Mexico with a lot of savings. I resigned from my previous job, and I came with the payouts of the vacation and sick time, and I am working through Upwork and just writing for whatever comes my way. And right now it's just broadly environmental education type writing. It's not super focused in what my goal is, but it is keeping me in Mexico as I figure out the next steps.
Have you found people interested in working with you who speak the indigenous language of Otomi?
Yeah, there's definitely people who are interested. I think the biggest challenge is really seeing it as something that I'm investing into as a job. I think people know me in the town, and they've always known that I wanted to learn the language. And I think establishing myself as someone that wants to do this professionally in the long term is a little bit of a challenge right now, because they see it as like a hobby, maybe even a phase, that I'm gonna be here in Mexico, in this town, for a little bit, and I'm gonna be tired, and I'm gonna want to go back to the United States where the big bucks are and things like that. One inspiration that I have, though, is the AICLS, or the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival. and they have a program, a mentor apprentice program, where what they do is they connect an elder with someone that wants to learn the language, and they spend, let's say, like a few hours a week together, and they just do regular everyday activities, except during that time they only speak their indigenous language and they don't speak English or another language. So what that does is it brings elders who may know the language but don't have the experience teaching the language. They bring them to an apprentice who might guide what is being learned by suggesting the activities, whether it's let's cook a traditional food or just do the chores around the house or go shopping. And it is also learning the language more in a more natural way in how we learn our first language, rather than like setting up the rules, the grammar rules that all of us forget. We just learn by trial and error and like hearing people say things and like making the language intuitive and stuff like that.
I took French in college, and for the 2 years that I had it, my professor spoke only French, and he was very animated, but he would act everything out, grammar, whatever. He would act it out, and only on very unusual situations would be so clear that we're not following him, then he would break into English and say a few words in English, but then switch right back to French. And it was a wonderful, very immersive experience. And I think that's the best way to learn a language. It's just great. It's a wonderful opportunity that you are creating and that you're developing. The program that you imagine and the learning environment that you want to design, if it's all set up, let's imagine that it's already all set up. Who is your program for?
My program would be for youth. And I think one thing that I always wanted to see in the programs that I've been a part of is a full family program, creating those opportunities for not just the youth to come out to these camps and these natural spaces, but also their parents.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It sounds like a great opportunity for multi-generational learning. I remember meeting someone at an education congress for education in botanic gardens. It was an event by Botanic Gardens Conservation International, and this person taught at the gardens in the Netherlands. And she had arranged a multi-generational program of botanical art where they would pair a young 20-something students from college, a local college, it's college town, with other people in the community, older people, other generations. And it was a hit. Everybody just enjoyed it and was learning wonderful things. Yeah. What's the landscape look like where you are at? What type of topics might you be addressing in your program?
Yeah, I think there's the issue of water sustainability in where I am. I think it's considered semi-arid, and like chaparral. The biggest trees are mesquite trees, which are actually pretty abundant, and it's like rough foliage with like thorns and drought resistant. And there's definitely has been a history of drought in this region. So the water sustainability, and it's an issue that goes back way back 500 years as the introduction of sheep, which actually is there's a dish called barbacoa hidalguense here that is just delicious, and I love to have it. But 500 years ago, when the sheep were introduced, it caused like a huge environmental crisis where the water cycle just completely collapsed. And although there were places of the cacti and the agaves and mesquites where they grew, because of this change in the ecology of water, this area became known for being dry and for being almost desert-like and rocky and like the floods when it does rain and stuff. So yeah, just making those connections between the water shortages that sometimes occur, how it could be worse because of climate change, and then also just the history of how it came to be this way.
When do you think your programming will begin?
It's a good question. I think right now I'm a little bit lost in how to make that happen. I would definitely have to come back and really write things out. And I think it would also not start off with the program, this program that I have in my mind. I think as I'm establishing myself here, I think it might come in like steps of, okay, now I am freelancing, but maybe in a couple months I can start teaching in the community. And because English is really is a skill that is really coveted, and like starting with that and establishing myself or like my reputation through teaching English, and using these techniques of learning intersectionally to start bringing in that information about the environment as I'm teaching English, and then from there really get to know the community partners that could be interested in setting up a program that is about environmental education and also the language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are teaching English classes, or will be soon teaching English classes. Oh, see, that's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a wonderful first step to your program, to heading towards the type of programming that you want to lead and towards having the type of conversations that you would like to have. And would you be establishing... Mm-hmm, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also, because of just having moved here, I don't know if there are programs out there that are already doing that type of work, and that's something that I really need to look into. So I'm not really like reinventing the wheel. Maybe those are organizations that I could partner with or work for to begin with.
Absolutely. Yeah, new partners. It's a great way to meet new partners. And then even at the vision that you have, it's okay if your program and their program rhyme, because you'll be doing different things still, and it's okay if your programs rhyme.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you feel you need to move forward right now? What would you like to have available to you right now to move forward, to begin presenting yourself in the way that you want to present yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that really has helped me is attending conferences like EE Forward, Talaterra, and or things like the Beatles. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the name. I went to one called the Beatles Institute, I think it's called. And just the people that I met, the resources that they provide, those kind of things have really helped me, that I plan to continue attending to really learn how to navigate this freelance world so that I can continue to work on my dream. For now, I think that the biggest thing that I feel like is missing, and maybe it's not necessarily missing, but it's just like the time to focus on my own work, on my own project, which I have a lot more of that now since I am freelancing and here in Mexico rather than working a full-time job in the United States. I also have to get my flow going and figure some things out.
Do you have a name for your program or your company, your new company? Or what are you considering?
For now, what I am doing is I am documenting this process of trying this out, and I'm putting it on YouTube under Ven Conmigo.
Okay.
Do you want me to spell it out or send that later? Or
Sure. Yes, I will ask you for spelling of other things as well. So yes, we can do that later.
Sure. Yeah. So it's Ven Conmigo on YouTube, which is a play on the phrase ven conmigo, which means come with me, except the last word is Miguel, which is how you say Miguel in Otomi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Yes. Oh, nice. And I love that. Your channel is about, or what you're saying through your channel, which is, I'm going over there. You want to come along with me? Yeah. Oh, that's
Yes.
wonderful. It's a beautiful sentiment and a beautiful invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And how is that going for you, documenting your process?
Pretty good. I think so far in terms of in the YouTube channel, I have uploaded like introductory videos that I feel like I need to establish first before I get into kind of like the more cultural content of where I am, of the indigenous language, of environmental education, and things like that. And I'm working on that. And there's just a few videos up so far. And in terms of documenting my day-to-day, one of my friends suggested to me that I just record everything, that I'd never know what I'm going to use, which is definitely good advice. And it's also something that I need to get used to the idea of doing that and think about also like my surroundings, because I'm not here by myself in my own, I have my own house, but I'm not here like kind of with nobody around. There's a lot of family that comes and goes, and just like thinking about their comfortability of being in front of a camera, of even the legality of like who would be considered working for me if I post videos of a lot of people in the community and stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff that also I'm figuring out.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you want to do more videos, not of more than just you speaking about like a daily log. You want to also capture conversation with other people around you, with people you're working with and all that as well.
It's definitely an option that I think would add that much more depth and visuals and more understanding of what's going on. For example, one of the elders that I was practicing Otomi with would definitely straight up said, "Oh, I don't want to be on the internet, but you can talk about me on the internet."
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Podcasting is a really uncomfortable and odd medium to some people. And definitely. Yeah. I understand that. I've had that conversation before too with other people. Yeah, technology it really is a different thing, being so visible. But your channel is a beautiful way of showing your work in progress and then showing the body of work as it progresses and as it develops.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. How can your colleagues listening to this episode help you?
Yeah, if y'all if you are interested in learning about my journey, watching me really just try to figure this out, I have YouTube and Facebook and Instagram accounts all under Ven Conmigo, and there's information about you can get involved there, ask me questions, give me ideas of what kind of content to publish, what kind of things people are interested in when it comes to making the move to maybe the country of one's roots, or switching to freelancing work and things like that. Just follow me on the social medias so that I can gain a following, people to respond to, and be people who can help me stay accountable to my work. And if you have the means to, I also have information there on how to donate to help with the project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and what are you using? Patreon, or what service are you using? Or
at the moment, asking for donations through PayPal.
Okay.
And then as I get a feel of what kind of content people are looking for, whether it's more on the travel side or the environmental education side or the language side, then I'll start developing what the Patreon page will look like.
Yes. You have already a body of work behind you when it comes to environmental education. You have a lot of experiences. You've worked with different organizations and different settings with learners of different ages. And all of those experiences brought you to where you are now. When you look over your shoulder and look back at the trail you've left behind, what do you see right now at this point?
Yeah. So I think I always like to start with the non-outdoor education work that I started with, and that was Wetzel's Pretzels, or a pretzel shop in the mall. And yes. I was there for 7 years. And I was also there as I was going to college and really taking classes that just seemed interesting to me, which is probably not the best career advice, but it was definitely fun to work on my associates for 7 years. And then finally I decided that what I wanted my job to be was something that I would enjoy as much as going to school. So I started that journey of trying to figure out what that would be. I also didn't think that education was going to be for me because I am not the most patient person in the world. But as I started tutoring and then working at a group home and then getting my first 6th grade science camp, that's where I learned the patience needed. That's where I learned from the students themselves. And I learned that I could be a patient person with important things to offer too. So then I started working in the San Bernardino Mountains as a camp instructor and cabin instructor. I went to the Sierra Nevada journeys for a few more years. Then I wanted to focus on my own community, and that's where I started looking inward. And first that meant an urban community in San Francisco. So I went to the Chrissy Field Center. And then I realized that I wanted to be even more specific than that. So that's when I left the Chrissy Field Center and came to Mexico to try to learn about and create content that is about this stuff that I'm learning about.
Yeah, see, it's really a body of work with a lot of breadth. Yeah, breadth and depth. What's next for you?
What's next? So, I don't know.
And that's okay. That's good. That's an answer.
I want to keep making content that will hopefully in and of itself be enlightening about indigenous communities, about the Otomi, new people, information for those of us Otomi folks who live disconnected from our culture and want to learn more about it. And hopefully at the same time that will be able to fund the more environmental education program dream that I have.
You have a wonderful journey ahead of you. It's so generous, the work that you are doing. And I would encourage you to set aside some of the naysayers or the people who maybe doubt where you're going and continue with this work. It is needed, and it is all-encompassing, and it addresses so many different levels of meaning-making and knowing about one's culture, knowing about the environment, the immediate environment. And that is such important work. So I encourage you to keep doing that. It's wonderful. Thank you, Miguel, for taking the time to tell us about your journey. And if you're interested, I'd love to touch base with you again later on to see where you are in your journey and to find out how things are going for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
To learn more about Miguel, visit the show notes for this episode at talaterra.com. Here you will find links to Miguel's YouTube channel and other social media accounts. You'll find information about ethnicity and language, a link to the organization Advocates for California Language Survival, as well as a link to the Native Lands website, where you can learn about whose native land you live on and work on. You'll also find links to other resources mentioned in this episode. Thank you for joining us today. See you next time. Talaterra is a podcast for and about independent educators working in natural resource fields and environmental education. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Tania Marien.